And we are live. This is Scholar Fiction with his hat. No, actually, no. I'm sorry. um, basically, yeah, this is the council. I am live here with a couple of guests that I'm really happy to have. Last week, we had I watched a video with Christopher Maute. Christopher Maute is a known atheist in the internet world. And he is probably one of, in my opinion, probably one of the most nicest guys you'd ever meet. And I'm really always excited to have him on because he's the most polite guy around. He's no Aaron Raw. Let's put it that way. So yeah, no kidding. So anyways, last week about Aaron Raw. Christopher here had a discussion with Dr. Kent Hovind, and it was a really great one. I'll put a link into it later on to kind of see what he feels about it, and so you can watch it all. So, anyways, I wanted to have Christopher Maute on and just kind of hang out and talk about whatever. And I have the cat.
The cat has sabotaged you. That's what it sounds like.
Dumb cat. Anyway, come on.
I love this.
Thanks. It's such a professional show.
Real quick,
okay.
Please mute yourself if you're not talking. Yeah,
if you're in here, we would ask that you mute your mic. So, anyways, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts about this. How did you feel about it? About the conversation you had with Dr. Kent Hovind, and also, before you get started on there, I want to also welcome Dr. Anthony Silvestro. He is one of the co-authors of a book called jeez. Now I just had it down too. The Origins of Kind. Oh, come on. What are you doing? Okay. All right. There you go. Of the Origins of Kind, right? Just say it. Don't make me look like an idiot.
On the Origin of Kinds.
Yes, the Origin of Kinds. You and John Eckel wrote that and released it, what was it, about 2 years ago?
Yeah, just over 2 years ago now.
Yeah. So anyway, Dr. To be honest, we're probably going to be tackling a little bit about evolution and such. And so I'm an idiot. Okay, I'm just a moron who doesn't know a lot of that stuff. But I wanted to bring in Dr. Anthony Silvestro in kind of as a counter discussion and just kind of get your thoughts on it, Dr. Anthony, about anything that maybe Christopher might have to say. So anyway, I just want to go ahead and get into first of all, your initial thoughts about the interview itself. What do you think?
I was super happy with the interview, not only because for anybody who watched it or anyone who chooses to watch it, you will see from the get-go that I'm a kind of fanboy on the guy, right? Even though I'm an atheist, I've watched a lot of Kent Hovind videos, like a lot of Kent Hovind videos. So it's interesting that he is making himself so available to people like me to have a discussion. I thought it was good. I tried to be as civil as possible. There were definitely some moments where how can I put it? I felt like I needed to redirect the conversation a little bit, to diffuse the conversation a little bit, because there were points where it seemed like he was so expecting it to be a debate that it wasn't, that he kind of was, he was almost trying to make that happen at a couple points. That's how it felt. It was never super duper overt, but obviously he went into his apologetic in a way that I was trying to be more meta about. Like, I don't want to engage in your apologetic. I would love to engage in you in a discussion about your apologetic, because I also think that he has other interesting ideas. But I mean, if you let me go, I will talk for a full hour. So I'll leave it at that and then kind of open it up to questions. But to answer your question, I think it went really well. I'm particularly heartened, and I'll leave it at this. I'm particularly heartened at the fact that he opened his door to me for future interviews, of which there will be one on Friday, April 6th. Is the 5th or 6th?
We gotta wait.
It's a Friday. Yeah. I figured I'm not gonna. I do this casually now. I've rebooted Meeting of the Minds, which is kind of like my interview hang.
Okay.
So, and I do it in a much more casual manner now, and I enjoy it more.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. A little background as far as how I got introduced with him was, it was I don't know how many years ago. It was probably early in my marriage, and my wife and I found just one particular video from our library of all places, and it was a Kent Hovind video about the issues with evolution and such. And so it was just a fascinating video. I mean, it was like about 2 hours long, and I kid you not, my wife and I, our jaws dropped after watching something like that, because we've never seen such a presentation with so much accuracy and so much backing up is what it was. I mean, he had pictures, he had links, he had references and resources that coming out. And so it was really an interesting thing to see. I mean, I really enjoyed, how he did it. Sadly though, as his life progressed on, he had some issues with taxes. And also, now his views about the KJV and just how it's he's a KGB onlyist, and then also there's connection with this one gal called Gail Ripplinger. If you ever get around to doing that, just check her out. She's a nut job. Anyway, she's a little bit of a crazy gal. So anyway, I did write some questions down concerning the video, because I rewatched it again. It's the second time last night, and
good for you.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to look like an idiot.
Well, I'm not looking like an idiot. I haven't rewatched it at all.
Yeah, okay.
See how this works. Come on, I can do this.
You said you don't agree with him, but you allow him to voice his side, and I just want to say kudos on that. I thought that was really good around the beginning, about 10-minute mark. You said that. I just thought that was really good.
I think I'd like to just touch on that. I think that's important and missing.
Yeah.
I understand that people are passionate about what they're talking about. I'm passionate about it as well. I probably express it a little differently than others, but sometimes the passion manifests as interrupting. And let's not confuse, like, I'm Italian American heritage, right? I know what overlapping conversation sounds like.
Yeah,
I'm familiar with overlap. I'm familiar with whoever's the loudest wins mentality, overlapping conversation, where everyone's on board with the fact that there is interruptions left and right. In certain discussions that you kind of expect to be long form, I see a lot of interrupting and people just not being able to finish their point, because on the way to getting to their point, the person is just splitting hairs the whole way. And when I watch that, I'm like, I want to know what this person's point that they're ramping up to is. And they're never getting to it, because on the ramp up to the point, they're just getting nitpicked, right? So I think that is I'm mindful of that courtesy when it's provided to me, like you're doing for me right now. And I try to reciprocate it, especially, and I did have to point out, like, I'm going to let you finish your points. Please don't interpret my silence as complicity or agreement with the points that you're making. But I do, I want you to be able to finish your point.
Gotcha. Yeah. There was also an issue with, I guess there was a misunderstanding or something, because a lot of times Dr. Hovind would speak and then he would kind of overtalk you. And so there was a lot of the mic cutting out on his end. There was a little bit of echo too, which was really annoying. He needs to get some earbuds, or either that, some ear.
I don't know if it's a resolution, and I should know this, right? But his audio was super tinny, like it wasn't through at a broad enough bandwidth.
Right. So, but there was a question about his credibility when it came to his PhD.
Sure.
And he said that he had what two doctorates, I think is what he said, and the third one was a
honorary
one.
Yes.
So I'm just kind of wondering, in your worldview, I mean, do people with PhDs have more credibility concerning proving creation, or because I brought in Dr. Anthony Silvestro, okay, and one of the big arguments I always hear people say is, "Oh, he's just a dentist." You know, it's like, well, when you dive into the background of what a dentist has to learn. I mean, Anthony, you can step in and just kind of give a quick thought on that. I mean, it's kind of frustrating when people say, well, just because you fall into just one particular category of a PhD, you don't really qualify when it comes to this topic of evolution. I don't know. Go ahead, well, Anthony.
Here's the issue, because I run into this on the streets all the time. It doesn't matter what somebody's profession is. It doesn't matter what somebody's education is, to a degree. Facts are facts. Truth are truth. And regardless if somebody who has no high school education says it, or if somebody who has a PhD says it, it's still the truth. And so we have to keep that in mind at the forefront. Anyway, can degrees help? Certainly. It can give you some confidence in somebody's skill level, in their knowledge base, in terms of being able to speak on a subject that is within their field. But it still changes nothing about what facts are and what truth is.
Right. Christopher, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a bunch of different directions we can go on this, right? So the first question you asked were about essentially Kent Hovind's bona fides, and the fact that he mentioned earning 2 degrees, right? I'm assuming this wasn't laid out exactly, but I'm assuming the timeline is, the original thesis that was leaked to in atheist circles, at least, that must have been from like Patriot University, I think it's what it's called, or something like that, where they consider it a diploma mill. It is a mail order or mail correspondence school.
Okay.
And I think that he got both of his earned PhDs from there. The second one he earned in jail, and his thesis was the book that he held up, and I forget what the name of that was. And then he got 1 honorary one. So let's see. The reason why I brought that up, right? So there's a couple layers to this, and Dr. Silvestro, I do want to get to, is it Silvestro? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Yes. Okay. So, and I do want to get around to the points that you had made too, but there's a couple layers here, and this is a fun topic. So if you don't mind, let's chew on this bone for a little bit. The impression that I got about Kent Hovind from the information, the very biased information that I got from the atheist circles that I ran in, is that in an attempt to seem more convincing, as somebody who was going around giving talks at like schools and churches and stuff like that about scientific information, the word on the street, so to speak, was, as I understood it, was that he was just trying to, being Dr. Kent Hovind is way more impressive to people in middle America at their churches when you're trying to convince them of creationism using the science, that I wouldn't call it science, so I'm air quoting his version of science that he uses. So when a doctor is telling you things that are science-y sounding, right, in a presentation that's slick in the way that he presents it, yeah, that means shucks, that probably fools a lot of people. So there's that layer of it.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the thing that I just said is true. What I'm saying is that's how I understood why he approached the PhD. And, you know, like because the bottom line is, if he really wanted to get a PhD from an accredited university, that's a completely different process. That is a mentorship that you have to be an apprentice in. There's postdocs and the whole academic ladder that you have to climb, and the layers of education that you have to go through, right? Anyway, so there's that. The second question was about credentials in general. Credentials in general in academic circles are the badge that you wear in that meritocracy, right? If you consider academia a meritocracy, and that means that you earn your status based on your merit, and merit is part of a system where you publish things in peer-reviewed journals, and they get referenced by other authors of peer-reviewed journal articles, and that increases your impact score and your H factor, all these things, right? You can't do it without a graduate level, right? Because usually the things that you're publishing on, and I believe the question that you asked was, does having a PhD give more credence to people about creation or something like that? Right?
Yeah, proving creation. I mean,
the answer is that seems like a little bit of a misguided question, because depending if you're talking about creation, like there's no scientific field of creation. If you're talking about evolution, then you're talking about biology. If you're talking about abiogenesis, well, that's a more theoretical branch of biology as I understand it. And it's a combination of other fields as well. So yes, in all of those fields, the higher your degree is, the more specificity you have in that field, right? But a general question of creation, it's like, oh, well, somebody can have a PhD in, I don't know, gender studies. That's a PhD, but their opinion on, you know, the origin of life, does it really have as much value? Well, no. So if you're talking about the origin of life and you're talking about the biological aspect, yes, somebody with a PhD in biology is going to, you know, be a little bit more informed about things than somebody who's not. And that's just the rule of thumb. That's the rule of thumb. Now, the next layer, Dr. Silvestro. So you're a dentist, and you're a form of medical doctor. There's the point that I was getting at with the gender, having a PhD in gender studies as it applies to creation. In academia, that holds water. And here's how it holds water. The degree that you have gives you status in the field in which you got it. In general, your opinions about other fields, unless they are directly related to your field in an overlapping fashion, right? Like biology, psychology, stuff like that, right? Like being obvious overlap, right? All psychology is biology. Just can't deny that. My opinion about physics and chemistry is I'm out of my wheelhouse, and you shouldn't pay attention to it, because I could only pursue it as a hobbyist, right? Except for super duper rare occasions. And as an autodidact, right? As somebody who was self-taught about it, so in other words, my degree in this area doesn't really give me insight into this other area. So how can I put this? To respectfully disagree, Dr. Silvestro, right? Your expertise in dentistry, in the way that I'm explaining how things work in academia, would lend you lots of credence in the field of dentistry. As it applies outside of the field of dentistry, it would be given less credence. So again, I don't say that I'm not volunteering things to insult you with. I'm trying to answer the question that was asked. So I hope you take it with a grain of salt that it deserves.
So I wrote a couple of points down. First of all, I take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't insult me at all. So I hear much worse things from atheists. So thank you for being nice.
Doing my best. I'm doing my best.
No, in all seriousness, we actually talked once before for just a few minutes, at the end of a council probably 2 years ago.
Yeah,
less than 2 years ago. So
yeah.
it's been a while. But I remembered you from being from then and being real nice. So a couple of things. I would agree with you. Being a dentist, having a doctorate in dentistry, would give me more credence to speak on dental things. I don't expect to use my dental degree as a way to justify my ability to speak on evolution or against evolution. The doctorate degree is out there. I wouldn't even call myself doctor. Everyone else didn't do it. It doesn't matter to me. But this is my point from before, is that I can speak very intelligently on creation and against evolution. And I can do it for a number of reasons. Number one, my dental degree does actually have a lot of science in it. So there's a lot of studies through my double major in math and chemistry in college, as well as the science classes I had in dental school that were general science, not specifically pertaining to dental. Having said that, do I have the amount of coursework that a PhD evolutionary biologist does? No, I don't. I make the case in my book, and I make the case in other areas, that I don't believe you need a PhD in evolutionary biology to understand the sham that evolution is. And so I think I can teach a middle schooler how to defeat literally a PhD evolutionary biologist by asking just a few questions about how evolution supposedly works. So this is where degrees don't matter in certain areas. I agree with you on one hand that it gives something more credence from the get-go, but once you start discussing things, it really comes down to a matter of, have you studied? Do you understand the facts? Do you understand the positions? And let's talk about it. You also brought a couple of points as you were peeling back layers regarding degrees. I think there's an insinuation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that Dr. Kent Hovind has used his doctorate degrees as a way to get into churches, because by showing the fact he has a degree, it gives him more credence with people, and they will invite him to churches more frequently. On the other hand,
I'm going to push back a little bit. I don't think I think that he could get into churches regardless.
Okay.
I just think that it adds a layer of legitimacy potentially to the lay person.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't have an issue with that. I have, yeah, that's fine. But here's the problem. And this is where there's a circular reasoning issue here, is you brought that up in one spot. In another spot, you said that, well, people who don't have a degree don't have as much value in the eyes of people. Right. And so there is a catch-22 here. And
that's to be specific, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, for the sake of clarity, I want you to critique my points, but what you just said wasn't my point. I was talking specifically within academia, and in case it needs to be said explicit, I consider the criteria for what is accepted within academia a specific special situation. It is not the population in general. It's not general population.
Okay, fair enough then. So I'll take back what I said about that catch-22 issue. But then I still go back to the original issue. Why is a degree necessary? Why does somebody have to have a PhD in evolutionary biology to be able to speak about evolution? Why can't other people speak about it who have learned the field? I agree from the get-go, when you talk to somebody who doesn't have a PhD in it, you're going to be a little bit more skeptical. You're going to not give them as much room, so to speak, as you would somebody who has a PhD. But once they start talking a little bit and they show you that they have some knowledge about this, you have to start wondering what they're saying. Is it true or is it not? Not if they have a degree in it or not, but what are they saying? And so I think that's really the issue. And I'll say one other point, and I'll give the floor back over to you, is that one thing I would strongly disagree on in what you brought up is that I would agree there's a science of evolution, the belief system of origins, because while evolution, the biologists want to say it starts with a single cell, and we want to talk about how life branched off from that cell into everything we see today, you cannot ignore the fact that evolution must have had a beginning somewhere. So you have to talk about origin of life. You have to go back to the origin of the universe. This whole thing has to come into play as we talk about evolution. When we talk about creation, there is as much science in creation as there is in evolution. The difference is this, and it's a major one, is A creationist and evolutionist can speak on science all day long. We can go back and forth on the science. We have the exact same evidence. It's going to be interpreted differently between an evolutionist and a creationist. I'm certain of that. We look at the same fossil, and while the evolutionist looks at a dinosaur fossil and sees 65 to 250 million years old, I see several thousand years. Same evidence. We apply the same scientific principles to get to that conclusion. The difference in creation versus evolution is that in addition to the science is that we have an eyewitness. We have an eyewitness who not only witnessed creation, but spoke creation into existence. And that same eyewitness has chosen to allow it to be written down for us to be able to read. So we have a second component that evolutionists don't have, is an eyewitness, the actual historical accounting of it. So I'll turn it over to you.
So to be clear, in talking about the topic of evolution, nothing's preventing anybody from joining the conversation, right? So let's make that clear. That's very different than the answer that I gave earlier, because I was talking specifically about how things are framed in academia. I think that something that we might disagree on is, let's see, again, multi-layers here. What string do I pull first? Let's talk about the difference between science, training in science, and science communication, right? And I just want to bring up the point that I'll bet you a dime to a dollar, right? I don't have a PhD. I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that depending on the topic, right, especially if it's something I'm super familiar with, I could talk to somebody with a PhD and make it seem like they don't know what they're talking about, right? And that's not because I'm particularly smarter than them in their own field. I just have better rhetorical skills on a certain day, right, at a certain time. And also, scientists in general are horrible communicators. So the ability to trip up a scientist about something even in their own field by asking simple questions that require the ability to eloquently fit 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag is a special skill, right? Let's not confuse that with validity of claims, being able to trip somebody up rhetorically in an exchange. In no way, shape, or form.
Yes, I want to jump in here as well. Here is that I'm not talking about tripping anybody up. The goal when I speak to a PhD evolutionary biologist, which I have done across the country, is never to trick them, never to trip them up on purpose. It's never to do that. It's not to deceive. It is to literally ask questions, because one of the things that Kent kept bringing up, and I know you didn't want to debate, and it wasn't about a debate. I listened to the whole thing this morning, so it's all fresh in my mind. Kent brings up some very, yeah, you're welcome. It was, and you did a great job on it.
Thank you.
Kent brought up some really good points, like the lies that are all over the textbooks. If we took out all of the known lies from the evolutionary textbooks, we would be left with nothing but a few imaginary drawings of what they think could have happened. And I could list them out. I mean, we could take the next 24 hours, really, and I could list out lie after lie after lie that's in there, especially some really, really big ones. The whole core of the evolutionary model it fails if we try to draw it through the scientific method. So again, it's not about tripping people up. That's never my intention to do. I care about watching people and people coming to Christ. That's what I care about. I care about the same for you as I do to anybody else I talk to who I know will be in hell when they die for eternity. And so that's what I care about. It's not about tripping you. It's not about tricking you. It's not about doing anything. It's about being sincere and talking you through this stuff, because I once bought that lie of evolution. I once bought the lie suppressing the truth about God. And I'm so very thankful that God opened my eyes to all this stuff. I was a guy who believed evolution all these years through these studies, and realized that when my eyes were open to it all, that the way that evolution is taught, with all these spectacular terms and in wonderful illustrations, is only surface deep. The moment you start asking probing questions just below the surface, it breaks down everywhere. So I wanted to clarify that point there to make sure we're on the same page with that. And sorry, I'll pop back out again.
No. So I'll take your point, but I do think that engaging in conversation, I do believe that, and maybe this is an indirect consequence of having these conversations that you have, but in attempting to, from your perspective, show them the lies, like expose the holes in the theory of the thing that they believe, from my perspective, that's a way to trip them up, right, in their own field. I see them as rhetorically the same. So that's my take on it. So I take that you see it a little bit differently. You brought up the example of textbooks, and I'll present to you what I presented to Kent Hovind. What you and I agree on is that science textbooks are not as good as they could be. Textbooks in general are not as good as they can be. The political process by which textbooks are made is a separate entity from the scientific field that it tries to report in the textbooks. So I don't see attacking the textbooks as a valid move, either as an argument or something worth defending. Like, we're going to agree, yeah, textbooks could be better. You will think that they will be better for by different changes than I probably think, but that's something that we can agree on, that the textbooks are not as good as they can be. So, but those are textbooks. That's not where science is determined. So let's leave it at that. Your most honest and genuine statement so far tonight, aside from, saying that you watched the interview this morning, you gave me a nice little compliment about how I did. I mean, that was super honest. It was genuine. Anthony, I really appreciate that. All right, I'm done with that. No, you had mentioned that this is all out of concern, if I can paraphrase. These conversations that you have are motivated by a concern that you have for people's souls, right? That they're going to go to hell or not, or they're going to, I don't know if you believe in heaven. I don't want to put that part in your mouth. So let's just say not going to hell. Let's just leave it at that. I think that is the most honest and refreshing way to start an apologetic. Unfortunately, it's how a lot of them end. Does that make sense? From my perspective as an atheist, what I see is, and this is going to be a little rabbit hole-ish, but I'm in the same arena, right? Hopefully we're both on the same page and in the same chapter, but I'm kind of exploring the chapter right now. What I see from an atheist is, from the evidentialist argument, there are arguments that point to very specific evidence that you think are counter arguments to the existing model that is accepted, which is evolution, right? The presuppositionalist argument is a philosophical breakdown via internal critique of an atheist position, right? Both of them start by either trying to show that you're wrong, evidence, or show that the consistency of your worldview is damaged in such a way that why don't you just apply one that has more consistency, like the Calvinist position that I hold. But they always end with, after that attempt to, once again, I see them as rhetorical moves to show blind spots. Once that's done, if a wall is hit, then and only then will the claims that I'm not here to talk philosophy with you, or whether you believe the evidence or not, it's about saving your soul, right? For me, if that's the take-home point, that's how the apologetic should start. because now it's not I'm arguing with you about things that we disagree with. You're concerned about me. That changes the whole framework of the conversation. Does that make sense? Even if I disagree with why you're concerned for me, it changes the conversation. Oh, this dude legitimately has these beliefs, and
changes the tone.
I'm on a path that he thinks is dangerous, and he's trying to help me. That's a different feeling than the evidence is against. The evidence proves the opposite of what you think, or philosophically, you can't be certain about what you know. It's just like, whoa, how is this? How does this communicate concern? It doesn't. Saying that you're concerned communicates concern great, right? So all of this, right? So I explored the chapter. Now let's get back on the same page. So you had mentioned, so you have to deal. I'm a little rambly tonight. You had mentioned that is your goal. I love that you put it in there so early in the conversation. I really appreciate that. Even though we're going to disagree on this, I do understand that from your perspective, you're doing the greatest good. And it is based out of concern. Even though we're having a little bit of a sword sharpening exchange, right? By having this conversation, and it's fun, you're not coming from a place to score points. It doesn't seem like that. I'm not getting that vibe from you. Well, and I'm trying to reciprocate.
Yeah. So, there's a guy who I do a lot of evangelism with and training with, and he actually just texted me and said that you owe him a sushi dinner. Andrew
Rappaport. You can tell Andrew that if he's buying, I will have the biggest sushi love boat with him anytime he wants.
He always buys, so don't worry about that.
Even when he tells you you need to buy, he'll still buy. So,
all right, sounds good. We'll all go to sushi then. Let's go.
One of the things that we do make sure we teach Christians in evangelizing that it's not about winning the argument. So I am a presuppositionalist. I use that argument more than anything. I love evidences. I think they're wonderful to use to show why our worldview is the only coherent worldview that exists. But ultimately, it has to be done within a presuppositional framework. So I'll say that. Having said all that now, is when we give our apologetic, we as Christians are called to be doing this with gentleness and respect. It's not about winning an argument. It's not about beating somebody down. It's literally apologetics are used to get to the gospel, and hopefully as quickly as possible. So that is my philosophy, and I hope more Christians adopt that type of philosophy as that time goes on, because it shouldn't be a contentious battle. They should be able to talk through. So my goal with speaking to guys like you or the PhD evolutionary biologist or anyone in between is that the goal is always get to the gospel, but we should be able to show that looking at the actual science, that I can demonstrate we actually have answers, that we have an ability to show why the worldview that you believe in is wrong. It doesn't actually work according to science. You've believed this big lie all along, which ultimately, as the Bible tells us in Romans 1, is that you're just suppressing the truth about God and your sin. The same sin that you will be held accountable for and then be held without excuse for in front of God on Judgment Day. And so that's why we go out and teach this, and that's how we do this.
Nice. Now, of course, we would have a very different conversation. Let's see, how can I put this? We would have a very different conversation if we chose to very much engage on either the evidentialist or presuppositional argument. And, a lot of it would have to do with what we consider reliable source. Like, to me, that's the more interesting conversation. So for instance, Anthony, can I call you Anthony, or do you prefer Dr. Silvestro?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
I slipped into Anthony, and I was just like,
Anthony is fine.
I didn't even ask his permission. So like if we were to have a conversation about it, like we would have to kind of agree that we use we consider different sources reliable. We're using slightly different definitions, and a conversation about what sources we consider reliable and why, and how that relates to science. To me, that's a more interesting discussion than getting into the apologetic. Also, like, why we would think any certain piece of evidence, or how we define things. Like, why do you think that that's how things should be defined? Why do you think that it should follow that we talk about origins while we're talking about evolutionary biology, right? Because you do use that language. You know, you have to talk about origins. You have to. You have very normative, prescriptive language. Whereas, you know, I would probably use more descriptive language.
Well, I mean, if you wanted to go in that direction today, that's fine. We can certainly pick a topic or two. I don't know if that's what you and John really wanted to do tonight or not, but
that's not my wheelhouse, right? If I were to have an in-depth discussion and try to find something that we can agree to disagree about, that I can be informed, you know, I manage a laboratory that studies psychology, so it would be a very psychology enriched topic that I would be able to sink my teeth into. So I don't know. Like, we could talk about belief formation. We can talk about how predictably irrational human beings are. You know, like we could talk about stuff like that. But yeah, we don't have to. By the way, we don't have to.
Not my wheelhouse.
Now you know how I feel. We can talk about dentistry. You know, like, shucks. What do you have to know about that?
Not much.
That's a horrible thing to say.
You know what's funny? I'll tell a quick story. Is my dad was a really good tool and die maker when I was growing up, and made parts for space shuttles, and considered one of the best in town here. And he owned his own machine shop after a while. Left the business he was in, and I remember being there when I was 12, 13 years old, and working on these big Bridgeports he taught me how to run. And I turned to my dad. I'm like, hey. I think I could be a tool and die maker one day. And he slapped me upside the head. Said, I've been working so hard so you don't have to. So my dad's an Italian immigrant. So I'm also Paisan. And, you know, like a lot of Italian immigrants, when they come to America, what do? They say, my kids are all going to become doctors. Every one of them doctors. And that's all was pushed in my head since I was a baby. So having said all that, all these years later, I go to dental school and become a dentist, which is literally a tool and die maker of the mouth. Use a lot of the same type of stuff.
You are the engineer of the mouth. Well, and by the way, but it's a little bit different. I mean, dentists save the most lives out of any profession every year. If my memory serves me right, like, my wife used to be a dental assistant. Like, there are some crazy statistics. Like, dentists are like the field of dentistry has saved lives in ways that, like, we take for granted.
Yeah.
You think that's a little exaggeration?
Maybe a little. Maybe a little.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll let her know that. I'll let her know that a dentist doesn't think that dentistry saves life. In fact, I'm going to tell her what you really feel, because what I heard was that you hate the field of dentistry. And I think that's weird, Anthony, for you to have to admit that in public.
Not quite.
I'm totally busted your chops right now. I normally am in bed at 9:30, and it's 10:46 for me right now. So I'm entering, like, late night funhouse mode.
Getting loopy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a little loopy.
Yeah. And I don't want to, keep you guys too late, because I know that, both you guys are on the East Coast. So, I'm on the West Coast. So I'm all good over here. You said earlier with the interview with Kent Hovind, you said, Chris, you said science is self-correcting.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really interesting phrase, because have you ever considered that science will eventually self-correct to biblical Christianity?
Oh, it's so fun you should mention that. So, no, I'll go with a no on that as the short answer. The long answer is no, probably not in the way that you're thinking, although I will not deny that as science advances and Christianity exists, people will continue to see scientific scientific advances as evidence of moving the arc towards biblical explanations. I think that that's a psychological phenomenon more than it is a factual pieces of data gathering. But wait, what was the question that you had before that?
So you said
self-correcting, the self-correcting nature of
right. You said that science is self-correcting.
Yes. Yeah. So, and to me, that's one of the things. It's one of the charms of science that makes it the gold standard of trying to provide natural explanations to natural phenomena. Right. So that's what I would limit science to. Right. Science is not good for everything. I think that scientific realism, scientism, relying too much on science for answers to everything is a mistake. When it comes to natural explanations to natural phenomena, it's the gold standard. It's the best that we have. And why? Because that admits to providing provisional knowledge that's willing to change in the face of future evidence. With that mechanism in place, it is self-correcting.
So I would agree with you in most circumstances with your statement in science. This is where I think it fails, is that when you have evolution, they already have in mind what they want to prove. And so the only self-correcting that happens is correcting to get to what they're already trying to prove, that they've already set in their mind. And so this is where I think Kent would have gone down had you guys talked about this a little bit more in again, textbooks. The reason why these errors are still in textbooks is because they are wanting to continue to propagate lies, which has been demonstrated, or they just don't have anything else to be able to put in there. Origin of life, you look at the Miller-Urey experiment, it's been shown clearly that you can't get life from not life. And yet this experiment, as just proven years ago, is still showing up in textbooks. Scientists know this. Why is it still there? I think it goes beyond just the politics that you're talking about. That there was a push in the scientific community to do whatever they can to prove this. And ultimately, it comes down to this issue. If it wasn't a matter of God, I would agree with you. I would agree that science in general is self-correcting if it didn't have anything to do with somebody's own conscience about God. But once you bring in God, and the same God that people are trying to suppress the truth about, all bets are off. And I think that's what we're seeing with evolution and Big Bang Theory, and that's a science that is really designed to do nothing but give us a naturalistic explanation to explain away God.
So I'm glad that you agree that, in most areas, at least from your perspective, science is self-correcting. As far as the points that you brought up, so I'll put this in psychological terms. In the presence of a neutral stimulus, two different people could walk away with two different perceptions of it. Right. And this has been shown in a bunch of different demonstrations. One is, the horrible the inaccuracy of eyewitness testimony. Right. So they purposely stage in a classroom for a purse to get stolen, and they ask everyone in the classroom for a description of the person, and you get wildly different perceptions of it. Right. So I'm going to use that as an analogy. For me, science is neutral in a way that you're and specifically the scientific theory of evolution in the field of biology, evolutionary biology. To me, it is a natural, organic manifestation of the scientific method as applied to biology. And I would use much more neutral terms in describing it than you do. The terms that you use are, from my perspective, they seem borderline conspiratorial, right? The word lies, the impression that you give that these theories exist only for the purpose of explaining away God and things like that. Those are saying that, it goes beyond the politics of the textbooks as to why these certain things are still in the textbooks. I don't take that extra step to explain things. Like from my perspective, once again, I would use just much more value neutral language to explain why the theory of evolution is still accepted. And it just has to do with, the philosophy of science that has to do with why theories work. Are they fruitful? Are they accurate? Are they are they probabilistic? Are they furthering the field, right? Because keep in mind, most of the work in biology isn't trying to show the lack of God. It's not trying to prove biology. It's taking this idea of biology as it currently exists as the best explanation, the best fit for all of the data that currently exists, with the full notion that it could change with a paradigm shift. And it could be looked at very differently thereafter. But, like they're not the basic science studies in biology aren't proving biology. They're taking the idea of biology to explain and generate more hypotheses underneath the bigger theory of evolution. And that's just, like I said, the reason why evolution is currently used is because, according to scientists, the consensus of experts agrees that it is the most fruitful, it's the most accurate, it's the best fit to the current evidence. So, and that's it, period. There is problems within science, politics of science. Evolution is hotly debated. If you want to see a hot debate on evolution, go to a biology conference. They're screaming at each other, right? If there were things about evolution that were incorrect, scientists make their name disproving existing theories. There would be Nobel Prizes left and right. People would be chomping at the bit, climbing over each other, backstabbing in an attempt to publish first this devastating evidence against the juggernaut theory that exists. This is how careers are made, is trying to show these things. So this is the inside look in academia of this. The way that you're describing this conspiratorial thing is just this thing that is very neutral to me. It's the water within which I swim. I manage a laboratory. I'm surrounded by academics. I go to conferences. I go to lectures. I give presentations. I do posters. It's just, I see careers. I see people climb the ladder in their career in science. It's not nefarious. It's not conspiratorial. It's not,
but if
people
I
trying
may,
to prove God doesn't exist.
Right. But if I may, you said science is neutral, but the fact of the matter is scientists are not.
True. It is an
and so
imperfect system. It's an imperfect system run by imperfect organisms.
Right. And they'll always have one particular side that they're going to agree with, which is anti-God.
I mean,
I'm
the only atheist in my lab, so I don't know. I don't know if that comports with what you're saying. Like, I'm the only atheist in my lab. There's a Catholic, there's a Jewish lady,
they don't count.
I know. These people believe in God. These are practicing religious people that practice science as well. So they're not trying to disprove God. They're just trying to understand the mind of God, right? Just a matter of perspective.
Well, I mean, psychology, to be fair, it's different, because what do you really study?
You say it's a soft science. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Not going there. I've done that enough.
Hey, man, I've been busting your chops all night. I deserve a good ribbing.
Oh, I used to do that to some of my PhD psychology friends. They loved it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Not a real science. What are you doing?
No, but no. In all fairness, I can't think of. And again, I would be a lay level psychologist. I have just a few psychology classes, so I'm nowhere near where you're at. But I can't imagine that there's many studies and much research you are doing that is trying to disprove God. You guys are trying to find out how the mind works. Now, granted, our presuppositions would be different. You would think that the mind somehow came about by random chemical reactions, doing nothing but obeying laws of chemistry and physics over billions of years, or I would say it was designed by God. But once we get to that point, that's where your studies really start. is right. So it's not really, nothing of what's going on in psychology is trying to disprove God. The evolutionary science is, and I think that's what John was trying to just point out here, is that that's where the biases occur. And it's actually easy to demonstrate. When guys have been found to be guilty of manipulating evidences, an evolutionary biologist who draws a fake drawing or makes a fake skull, which has happened countless times, do those guys get fired from their positions? No. We look at the creation scientist. Yes. I don't know of a single one that's happened to, but I can rattle off a whole bunch of creation guys that this has happened to, especially recently.
Yeah, but I have to say that's rhetorically weak. Do you know of every conviction of plagiarism or data fraud that has come, that has existed in the past 10 years? What percentage of those were punished? Like, these are statistics that you would need like very specific source in order to say. And to be honest, because we have a difference of opinion, I don't consider you a reliable source for this kind of thing. It just seems like a drive-by attempt at fact dumping, and I don't grant that.
And I don't need you to. That's not the point of it. But because you could easily go and research this yourself and find some of these things out. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter remains, there was a creation scientist who had the audacity to break open a triceratops horn. And when it was broken open, lo and behold, what do we find? Every time we find a dinosaur bone that gets broken open, red blood cells, spongy tissue. Impossible to have been around for 65 million years as a fossil. Impossible. And the biologists know it. And so why is it that this guy gets fired, end up winning a lawsuit somehow? Because even the court systems are anti-God by and large. But he won his lawsuit by getting fired because he brought out evidence that the school is trying to suppress. And he's one of several scientists that this has actually happened to, trying to break ranks. So when you talk about trying to break ranks, creation scientists, oh yeah, if they were allowed to do this, evolution would have been destroyed decades ago. But they're getting fired. The stuff's being suppressed. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go do the research on your own. But these cases abound with the creation scientists. So again, going back to what John said, the issue in biology and biochemistry and some of these other related fields is that it is an anti-God mentality by and large among the scientists. And what they're going to protect by and large is their anti-God philosophy. And their science is always going to be consistent with that type of stuff, because if not, you're cast out. You can't get jobs. Creation scientists have a really hard time getting jobs. When they're outed, they're getting tossed out of PhD programs. It's really a hostile environment of what has been happening over the last several years. That's the part that's unfortunate. What Kent was bringing up, what's that? Well, so while you're thinking,
I'm just not.
Okay.
I'm not granting these things that you're saying, right? Again, I'm the guest on this show. And so even more so than when I am the host, I very much want you to be able to finish your thoughts. But the picture that you're painting, please, for people that are watching, or for you yourself, please do not take my silence as complicity that this is, or agreement that this is true. Yeah. I understand that there is a narrative that you adhere to. And that is the narrative that you're trying to explain.
That's right.
I don't accept that narrative.
Well, that's a narrative that I would tell you to go research.
It's been researched. The reason why I don't grant it is because it's played out. This is the plot of the Ben Stein movie Expelled. There are websites and YouTube channels dedicated to dismantling this argument. So I don't have the time or gumption to do it. I recommend for people that want the critique to that argument, go to Expelled Exposed, I think is the counter argument to Expelled in the plot therein. Right? It's just shot down. There's so many holes in the things that you're saying that it's hard to let you just keep saying it.
Oh, but it is happening, and many have happened since the Expelled movie came out. So it is happening out there. And again, if it wasn't happening, why are we not seeing creation and evolution being both taught in schools. These are both origins.
That's a leap of logic. Why would you expect that?
Why? Because they are both options. We have as much creation science as the evolutionists say they have about evolutionary science. Why are they not both put in there?
That's a completely different argument.
No, this is not a different argument. We have tons of science. Why shouldn't somebody be able to look at
you jumped. I'm sorry. I need to point this out.
Jump to where?
You have jumped from the inability of creation scientists to work up the academic ladder to whether or not in school fair time should be given to creation science than evolution science. Those are two completely unrelated, different topics.
No, they're part of the same agenda. There are two different topics under the exact same umbrella.
So I can see how it fits into a suppressed agenda.
Okay.
If you take on a conspiratorial frame of mind.
It's not conspiracy.
It sounds. I mean, you use their lies of a agenda that goes beyond politics. I mean, this is the language of propaganda.
Nebraska Man, Piltdown Man, Lucy, the scientist who took the hips of Lucy and
dedicated to taking all of this down. I don't have time to do it right now, or the gumption.
You're talking about websites that were written by people who are still trying to protect the same worldview. It doesn't prove anything other than somebody threw up a website. But I mean, that's all.
That's an assertion. All that we really know in talking about it neutrally. But I'm not asserting. I'm asserting that there are websites that provide counter arguments to the arguments that you're providing. I sympathize to the counter arguments. That's all that I'm saying. Right? I'm not saying that the arguments exist for nefarious reasons in the way that you're saying that counter arguments exist for nefarious reasons. That's not the same. We're not on the same level playing field.
So, Dr. Anthony here, he actually pointed out something like you can argue about whether or not these people got fired for whatever reason, but let's get down to the facts of whenever they do find like a dinosaur bone, and they actually find a fleshy pulp, or they find red blood cells or whatever inside, that itself has nothing to do with any kind of conspiratorial thing. It's a fact that they actually found, something that should not have lived for, millions and millions of years.
If I remember
so correctly, how do you get around that?
Well, you don't get around it. What you do is clarify it. So again, this is not my wheelhouse, but I'll let you know how I understand it.
Okay.
One of the first articles that came out about this, the very author, who is a Christian and may even be a creationist, said that her results had nothing to do with the way that it was run with by creation science websites. She had an explanation because it was her field. And that explanation, again, you just need to look up. I don't remember the name of this woman, and I don't remember the name of these articles. Say it again.
Schweitzer,
yeah. Just look up the paragraphs that she wrote about her own research and how she interprets it. To say that there is no explanation and that it's impossible to be, it is possible to be, and the explanation for it is given by the author who published it.
Well, actually, to be accurate, she didn't give an explanation. They gave a couple of ideas of how all of a sudden, because up until this point, when that bone was broken open, it was always assumed dinosaur bones were 65 million years old at least, and that you would never find this stuff. It has always been believed that spongy tissue, red blood cells, DNA sequences would never have lasted anywhere near as long as what it would take. I mean, because this would be the modern Jurassic Park, right? So it's never been assumed that these things could last. When the bone was broken open and she saw it, instead of all of a sudden saying, oh, wait a minute, we got a problem here, it wasn't that. It was, I wonder what mechanism could have preserved this for over 65 million years. And so that paper actually just gave some explanation as to how this could have happened without even really considering, well, maybe the dinosaur bones really aren't as old as what we've always thought they were. That's really what happened in there.
Exactly. So again, as I'm listening to you say it, I'm totally agreeing with you. And I would paraphrase what you just said is, she did her job Her job is to give natural explanations for natural phenomena. Her potential explanations that were theoretical in nature were naturalistic, theoretical potential explanations for the natural phenomena that she saw. She tailored her explanation in that framework because that's the framework within which she is working. Again, it sounds like you're making it. It sounds like you're making it sound like something that it's not. It almost makes it sound like you're saying she hid or purposely didn't use an explanation that was available to her, which is the God explanation. And that's injecting a thought process that doesn't happen when science papers are written.
Well, I think I'm making an accurate, I think I'm getting an accurate thought here, because if she did what you were claiming, that she came up with explanations, one of the explanations should have been that maybe these bones aren't as old as they were. She could have come up with 1,001 different ways that you could have preserved soft tissue, but one of these ways should have said, well, maybe these bones aren't as old. That wasn't even part of the discussion.
Why should it have?
Because it's a possibility. That's why. Now, I would say it's the only possibility, but it's a possibility, even to the most ardent of atheists.
If it is a possibility and that is the only criteria, then the discussion section would take up volumes of libraries, right? Because the amount of things that are possible, right? Every possibility has to be tethered to a probability. And those probabilities need to be fit within a word count limit that we all have when we publish papers. So the amount of decisions that went into how many options that she chose to include in her paper as explanations for what she found, that's neither here nor there. She didn't have to, and she shouldn't have done anything than she did, right? It's a peer-reviewed paper. If her peers thought that she should have included the things that you said, they would have told her to. They'd have returned it to her and said, hey, include some more options, right? That is the firewall of preventing personal bias from getting through.
But you understand the presuppositions that you're standing on is a bias as well. And so...
Oh, I do. Please don't say that I don't. Once again, psychology guy. I know that there are... I am dripping in biases.
Yeah, no, I get it. And you admitted that early on. I think you even admitted in the Kent Hovind debate.
I'm admitting it now.
Yeah, and now. But the reality is that those same scientists, I would argue, are the ones protecting the worldview of old ages, old Earth. Mm-hmm. And so, even if it's peer reviewed,
using the language, even using the language protecting, it already paints a narrative that I'm just not granting.
Yeah, well, and you shouldn't.
Listen to you.
I wouldn't expect you to. You're an atheist. You're at enmity with God right now. You're at war with God. I wouldn't expect you to all of a sudden say, "You're right, Anthony. I know it. You and I know it. You're right." I don't expect that out of you, and that's okay. But I will say, because I think John is trying to get us to stop here. If you're reading the group chat, he's telling us
that's his own fault. He wound us up and let us go.
I
know. That's my problem.
Anthony, I genuinely think that you and I could talk for hours. I mean, let's exchange information.
I'm sure. But so let me say this then. It's like, at least as we start wrapping up, because I wouldn't be doing my job right if I didn't. What do you know what the gospel is?
Yes.
What is it?
The gospel or a gospel?
The gospel.
The gospel.
The gospel that causes someone to be saved.
I don't know it from. Oh, I would have to guess then. If you're asking for a technical definition,
just give me what you have.
The gospel.
Yeah.
So some would say that the gospel are the books that are written in the New Testament. Some would say that it is the experience of being born again, accepting Jesus into your heart as the Savior and Son of Christ, having a walk with God from that point forward, repenting of your sins, and doing everything that you can to proselytize and make sure that everybody knows about the word.
Okay, that's a fun compilation of stuff there. Let me simplify it. Yeah, because I'm sure you've had all this stuff thrown at you over the years, right?
And if you let me keep going, I would have talked more.
And you probably would have eventually come out with everything that I wanted you to say. So
how many monkeys does it take to write Shakespeare?
Exactly, right? No, in all seriousness, I mean, the gospel is that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures. He was buried. He was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. And the bottom line is I'm sure you would admit as well as I do is that sinned continuously. You've broken God's law continuously. You may not call it God, but you know that you've done these things. and the reality is that when we die, whether you believe in him or not, we are going to owe a punishment to God for our sins. We owe a sin debt to him. And yet that sin debt was paid by Jesus Christ, who lived the perfect life we're not capable of, went to the cross to die. And for those who repented and put their trust in him, that his death, burial, and resurrection paid that penalty that you owe to God for your sins. That's the gospel. That's a clear presentation of the gospel. So I wanted to make sure that you at least heard that, because the thing that I would enjoy most in life when I wake up tomorrow morning is to know that you woke up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m, repenting of your sin. And that you call up John and we have another discussion tomorrow about you being newly saved and born again.
Amen.
That would be awesome.
As I mentioned earlier, I know that is actually coming from a genuine place of concern, and you're not trying to score points. Again, because I see it that way and recognize that at the end of conversations like this, it is incumbent upon you to mention the things that you mentioned. Thank you, sincerely. Like I genuinely take it for the sincere and genuine notion that it is meant to be. You're concerned for my soul, right? It is a serious business to you.
Oh yeah.
And so, and I'm not trying to lighten it, right? I'm not trying to dismiss it. Again, we're going to disagree, but I'm not trying to disagree by being dismissive. I genuinely take to heart that you are concerned to that level. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening.
Of course. Of course.
Let me also just say, since we're all just kissing up to each other.
Dude, now that hat on.
Yeah, I know. Christopher, I would say that you're probably one of my favorite atheists. Really, I always
yes.
I know. You're chalk one up.
You should do an atheist award show this year.
Yeah, exactly. That would be funny. Everything would be all subjective, though. So. But I would say that you're probably one of my favorite atheists around, because not only are you always polite and kind to other people, you give them the opportunity to speak and to like I said, to allow Andrew to even to share the gospel to you. But what I really like about it is about you mostly is I almost consider you like a friend, even though we've never met, in real life. And you're on the other side of the United States, and I'm over here in Washington. But I so respect you for what you do and how you handle your position, and that's always it's just always a great thing to see, because I really hope that other atheists who are just rabid, they're just horrible. And
do you know what the worst thing for atheists is? Atheists. Other atheists.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a horror show.
Yeah. I can't watch like the non sequitur show. I can't be in these atheist debate groups, because they're awful. They're just so bad. But that goes along
for, like I was saying earlier, there's something to be said for like sharpening your sword, like rhetorically, just honing your argument, being able to, be in the position of Neo in the Matrix, dodging bullets, should you want to be that person, right? It takes practice. But yeah, to your point, sometimes it just goes nuts, and it just gets a little too tribal. It gets a little too point scoring. It gets a little less sparring, right? Because you want a sparring partner. You don't want to be mad at the person you're sparring with,
right?
I don't know.
Yeah. I had like about maybe 6 or 7 other questions to ask, but it's already going, way over time right now. And so
let's do another one.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one. Maybe just you and actually have Anthony on your show. That'd be awesome. I would totally love to
absolutely
watch that.
We'll make sure we exchange information.
Yeah. But so I think my point was if you were ever to become a Christian, atheists would be sweating bullets. I guarantee it, because they would not be able to handle your arguments, your your kindness, just the way that you are very open-minded, and to be, you're just a great example of how a a Christian should act. But you're not a Christian. You're an atheist. So it's rather funny, actually, because sometimes I even see Christians act worse than some atheists, and so it's really frustrating to see that, you know, atheists, people like you would conduct themselves better than what they should. So
thank you very much for all the kind words. I really appreciate that. I
really do. I always look up to you, and I think you're one of the best guys on the internet. I really do enjoy that. Go ahead and plug your show, and let me know, you know, how can people get a hold of you or watch your show? Or
so my name is Christopher Maute. So the last name is spelled Maute. It's spelled like saute with an M, but it's pronounced like howdy with an M. So if you say howdy Maute, and it rhymes, you're pronouncing it correctly.
Actually, anyway, I did a little wordplay on my the name of the video is,
I saw that,
Maute Good Leader.
I see.
It's like a mighty good leader, but I decided to play on words.
Mighty Maute.
Oh,
Maute Man. Anyway, so Maute Man. Yeah, so you can find my YouTube channel. I believe my username is Maute Man, but Christopher Maute, if you can remember that, you can go look that up. Every once in a while, I do an interview show called Meeting of the Minds, and as you can tell by the name of it, I'm looking to have I'm looking to have civil discussions with people I disagree with without it getting disagreeable. So I'm specifically looking for people that are interested in the invitation and the social contract that I'm extending, which is giving benefit of the doubt, charitability, civility. It can get heated, it can get passionate, but it never gets insulting or disagreeable. Right. And, you know, it like a pizza and beer. So one of the first people that I interviewed was Dustin Seeger, and he and I like built a good relationship. And from that point forward, we just talked about our discussions as pizza and beer. We never met in real life, but we always pretend like, hey, let's talk to each other like we're talking over pizza and beer. So that's kind of what the Meeting of the Minds thing is. Also, I play music. I have a bunch of music videos there. I interview scientists. So if you want to see like my non-religion interviewing chops, you can go check that out. I also do cooking shows. I just, you know, I use the internet as like my outlet for my hobbies. So
cool.
If you're interested in any of those, head that way.
Dr. Anthony Silvestro, writer of The Origins of Kinds, one of the writers. Go ahead and plug up your go ahead and plug your stuff that you have. How can people see what you're up to and learn of you?
Too much fiber plugged up.
How does the psychologist know about fiber and getting plugged up? Isn't that outside his wheelhouse and his degree?
Personal experience.
Fair enough. That's my argument.
They tell you to ease into Metamucil for a reason. Okay.
And you thought we were going to get cranky, John.
Yeah, I know.
So my book on the Origin of Kinds, it's you know, one thing we really enjoy about it is it's a book that takes biblical evangelism, precept apologetics, and creation apologetics, and melds them together. And there's a lot of families that have been using it as a discipleship for their kids, and a number of church studies have been going on using the book. So it makes me feel wonderful that it's being used out there. So that book can be gotten on the strivingfraternity.org website. And I think Andrew's got some really good deals going on right now for donations and books. So people might want to go check that out. And what I'm up to now is a couple of things. I've been still working with Striving Fraternity, enjoying that a lot, and continuing to speak with Andrew and Frank. I've also joined up with Mike Riddle, the creationist out in Boise, Idaho. And I'm doing a lot of speaking with him now as well. And so, yeah, I'm just, I've gotten busy in some stuff. And one thing you might, you probably don't know this yet, John, is my wife and I actually sold our dental practice at the end of October last year.
Okay.
And so, you know, we had been aiming to do this at some point, and it finally came to fruition. And so now it's going to lend itself to more time for me to be able to speak and witness in college campuses, which is really my favorite place to go.
Cool.
That's if I had a choice between going to teach in a church and going to witness on a campus, I'd probably choose the campus most of the time. So
yeah, that kind of interaction is just much more livelier, much more. You just get so much adrenaline. Yeah, you just get definitely a rush.
You do, and you get to share the gospel with hundreds of people within just a couple of hours. You know, it's really wonderful to do. So
really good stuff. Yeah, Starting for Eternity. Go ahead and go there and support them. And another cat.
Dude, you're like the cat lady.
Pulling them out.
Yeah, I know.
What's this in my pocket? Another cat.
What the heck is this?
What's that behind your ear? A cat.
So anyway, Anthony, I'm so glad that you made it here. I know that you said you weren't going to be here for like 30 minutes, but apparently you stuck around for the entire episode.
Good man.
I really do appreciate it. I really appreciate you guys both conversations and just the kindness that you showed, and I really do appreciate it. You brought up Dustin Seegers, Chris, and I wanted to point out to you on my YouTube channel on Atomic Apologetics. I've been doing a remastering of The Narrow Mind. I don't know if you never know about that show, but it was an old internet show back in 2005, 2006, 2008. And so what it was Gene Cook Jr., who was a pastor at the time. Now he's into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but he had his own little radio show, or internet radio show, I should say. And one of the regular callers was Dustin Seegers. And it is always such a joy to actually hear him speak. So if you ever want to hear Dustin Seegers back in the early days of 2005 or 2004 or so, boy, he just comes out and he knocks things out of the park when it comes to that stuff. But it's called The Narrow Mind. Sometimes there's also the Atheist Hour, and then various other little tidbits that I've been putting in there, comedy stuff, and also his sermons, Gene Cook sermons. So it's just a really good thing that I'm doing. I'm actually taking the audio, cleaning it up, and reposting them and putting them on. And it's been a lot of fun just doing that. So yeah. So if you ever get the fix to listen to Dustin Seegers, go ahead. Nice. Check it out.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. In fact, I think one of the episodes, I think it's episode 5 or episode 7. I can't remember what it is, but it's at the very end of the hour. Saitin Brudenkate calls in for the first time ever, and basically he's like showing that he's just starting with his presuppositional apologetics research, and it was just really interesting how this very early call of a younger side, trying to figure out presuppositional apologetics, and it's kind of a neat little bonus, to hear a guy just start off, and so it's kind of fun. So with that, I just want to say thank you again, guys. I really appreciate everything you've all done. Sorry, it's a little different of a show, but I wanted to just give Christopher a pat on the back for a good interview with Dr. Kent Hovind. Check out the interview. I think it was really good. I think you can learn a lot from how an atheist can handle a cordial conversation with another guy who's he's very smart guy, but yet he's, I don't know, sometimes I'm not going to go anywhere with that. I don't want to say anything negative about him. So anyway, I really appreciate you guys. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just say the council is no longer in session. Everybody else left. So, okay. So thank you again. and we will see you next week.